A billionaire CEO walks into a diner at 6 a.m. with 12 hours left to save his empire. The woman pouring his coffee? She's about to become the only thing standing between him and total ruin. What happens next will change both their lives forever. If you want to see how a waitress outsmarts Wall Street predators and a broken man learns to trust again, stay until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began. A morning neither of them saw coming. The bell above the door chimed at 6:07 a.m., cutting through the early silence of Riverside Diner like a knife. Clara Whitmore glanced up from wiping down the counter, her hands moving in the same circular motion they'd traced 1,000 mornings before. The customer who stepped inside didn't belong here. Not in this place. Not at this hour. He was tall, maybe 6'2", wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, but it was wrinkled in ways expensive fabric shouldn't wrinkle, like he'd slept in it, or hadn't slept at all. His dark hair stuck up slightly on one side, and there was a smudge on his left cheek that might have been ink or exhaustion made visible. His eyes, gray, sharp, haunted, swept the empty diner before landing on her. Clara felt something tighten in her chest. Recognition, maybe. Not of him specifically, but of that look. The one people wore when they were hanging onto something by their fingernails. "Sit anywhere," she said, keeping her voice light and professional. Years of waitressing had taught her to read people fast. This man was either running from something or running out of time. Possibly both. He chose the corner booth farthest from the door, sliding in with his back to the wall. His phone hit the table first, screen down, followed by a leather portfolio that landed with the weight of something important. Clara gave him 30 seconds before approaching with a pot of coffee and a laminated menu that had seen better decades. "Coffee?" she asked. "Please." His voice came out rough, like he'd been yelling, or maybe just breathing wrong for too long. She flipped the ceramic mug upright and poured. He wrapped both hands around it immediately, despite the steam rising between his fingers. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble across his jaw. Mid-30s, she guessed. Successful, obviously. Desperate, definitely. "You need a minute with the menu?" Clara asked. He didn't even glance at it. "Whatever's fast. Eggs, toast, bacon, 5 minutes." "Fine." She turned to go, but his voice stopped her. "Wait!" Clara looked back. He was staring at his phone like it might explode. "You know anything about business?" he asked. The question came out strange, too direct, like he'd forgotten how normal conversations worked. She blinked. "I know how to run a tab and balance a register." "Not what I meant." He rubbed his face with one hand, and Clara saw his fingers trembling slightly. "Forget it, stupid question." But Clara didn't move. Something in his voice had hooked her attention, a specific kind of panic she remembered from her own past, from late nights hunched over textbooks she could barely afford, from the moment she'd dropped out of grad school when her mother got sick, from the exact second she'd realized some doors, once closed, didn't open again. "What kind of business?" she heard herself ask. His eyes snapped up. They were bloodshot, she noticed, and surprised. Tech. Software development. Corporate structure. He said it like he was testing her, waiting for her to back away. Clara felt something stir in the back of her mind. Dust on old knowledge. "That's pretty broad." "Yeah." He let out a breath that might have been a laugh if it had any humor in it. "Yeah, it is." The kitchen bell dinged. Another order up, not his. Clara should have walked away. Should have stuck to coffee refills and small talk and the carefully maintained distance between servers and served. But she'd seen that look in the mirror often enough to recognize it in someone else. "I studied finance," she said quietly. "A while ago, before—" She stopped. Before didn't matter. "I didn't finish the degree, but I got through most of it." He sat up straighter, and for the first time since walking in, he really looked at her. Not through her, not past her, but at her. Clara felt exposed under that gaze, like he was reading her the way she'd been reading him. "What's your name?" he asked. Clara Whitmore." "Ethan Calloway." He didn't offer his hand, but she saw the way his jaw worked, like he was chewing on a decision. "You want to hear something insane? Today's been pretty slow so far." That almost got a smile. Almost. I'm about to lose everything I've built in the last 10 years, by noon probably. Maybe sooner if my CFO calls with the news I'm expecting. Clara's stomach dropped. She'd been right. This was a man running out of time. I'm sorry. Don't be. Not yet. Ethan flipped open the portfolio, and Clara saw papers covered in numbers, charts, projections. Red ink everywhere. You said you studied finance. Can you read a balance sheet? This was crazy. She knew it was crazy. She had 3 other tables to worry about once the breakfast rush started. Orders to take, bills to chase. But something in those bloodshot eyes made her nod. Yeah, I can read it. Then tell me if I'm missing something. He turned the portfolio toward her. Because 6 accountants, 2 lawyers, and a board of directors all say I'm finished. And I've got a 7-year-old daughter who's going to wake up this morning thinking her dad's a goddamn hero. The way his voice cracked on the word daughter hit Clara somewhere deep. She slid into the booth across from him without thinking, her eyes already scanning the top page. The numbers swam into focus. Assets, liabilities, quarterly projections, revenue streams. A company called Callaway Technologies. She recognized the name, vaguely. They'd done something with AI infrastructure, cloud solutions. Been in the business section a few times. What happened? She asked, flipping to the next page. My VP of Finance happened. Marcus Reed. Worked with him for 8 years. Trusted him with everything. Ethan's hands curled into fists on the table. He embezzled $47 million over the last 18 months. Buried it in fake vendor contracts, offshore accounts. We didn't catch it until last week. Claire's head jerked up. Jesus. He's already in the wind, probably somewhere without extradition. Ethan's jaw clenched. But the damage is done. The company's bleeding cash, investors are panicking, and the board wants to force a merger with Titan Corp to stop the hemorrhaging. Titan Corp? Clara knew that name too. They were brutal, the kind of company that bought competitors just to strip them for parts. They'll gut you. They'll gut me, fire half my staff, and turn the rest into cubicle drones. His voice was flat now, like he'd already accepted it. But according to everyone who gets paid to know better, it's the only move. Sell now or watch it collapse completely. Clara looked back at the numbers. The picture was bad, worse than bad. Revenue down 30% quarter over quarter. Operating costs through the roof. Investor confidence shot. But something nagged at her, a detail trying to surface through years of rust. Your tech, she said slowly. The AI platform you built. It's proprietary, right? Yeah, why? Who owns the patents? Ethan frowned. The company does. We've got 17 core patents and about 40 peripheral ones. Clara felt her pulse quicken. It was still there, the part of her brain that used to light up in seminar rooms, that used to tear through case studies and find the angle everyone else missed. And Titan Corp wants those patents. Obviously, that's the whole point of the merger. Right. But what if... She stopped, knowing how it would sound. What if you didn't sell the company? What if you just licensed the technology? Ethan stared at her. What? Short-term licensing deals. Exclusive access to specific patents for defined periods. Clara's hand moved across the page, finding the asset column. You've got technology worth hundreds of millions sitting here. Instead of selling it all for pennies on the dollar, you lease it out. Generate immediate cash flow without giving up ownership or control. The silence that followed felt massive. Ethan's eyes were locked on hers, and Clara could see him thinking, really thinking, for the first time since he'd walked in. The board would never go for it, he said finally. Why not? Because it's risky, unproven. We'd be betting everything on finding buyers fast enough to matter. You're already betting everything on a merger that will destroy the company anyway. Clara tapped the liability column. This gives you breathing room, 60 days, 90 if you structure it right. Time to fix the cash flow problem without handing over the keys. Ethan leaned back, his hand over his mouth, eyes distant. Clara watched him process it, saw the moment the idea took root. It was like watching someone drowning suddenly remember they could swim. The enterprise clients, he muttered. The ones we've been pitching annual contracts to. We could offer them 6-month licenses instead. Premium pricing for immediate access. His eyes refocused on her. That's brilliant. That's actually brilliant. Heat crept up Clara's neck. It's just an idea. It's more than I had 5 minutes ago. He was already reaching for his phone, fingers flying across the screen. I need to call my attorney. And my CFO, Jesus, we've got 3 hours before the board meeting. Clara started to slide out of the booth, but Ethan's hand shot across the table, stopping just short of grabbing her wrist. Wait, don't go yet. She froze. His hand hovered there, suspended, like he'd forgotten how to complete the gesture. Slowly, he pulled back. Please, he added, quieter. Just stay while I make these calls. It was the please that did it, the crack in the armor. Clara nodded and settled back into the vinyl seat, her hands wrapped around the coffee pot she'd somehow still been holding. Ethan's first call went to someone named David. The conversation was rapid fire, technical. Patent classifications, licensing structures, precedent cases. Clara watched him transform as he talked, shoulders straightening, voice sharpening. The desperate man who'd stumbled in was being replaced by something harder, more focused. The second call was to Michelle, his CFO. That one was shorter, more tense. Clara heard phrases like temporary solution and buy us time and get the projections updated. When he hung up, he immediately started typing notes into his phone. Clara's other customers trickled in. She excused herself to take orders, pour coffee, deliver plates of eggs and hash browns. But her eyes kept drifting back to the corner booth, where Ethan Calloway sat surrounded by papers and possibilities, rebuilding his empire one phone call at a time. When the breakfast rush peaked, Clara lost track of him in the chaos. By the time she looked up again, his booth was empty. The portfolio was gone. So was he. Her heart sank in a way that surprised her. She'd expected, what? A thank you? A goodbye? She'd been a stranger who'd answered a question. Nothing more. But then she spotted the envelope on the table. Inside was a business card. Thick, expensive cardstock with raised lettering. Ethan Calloway, CEO, Calloway Technologies. And beneath it, a handwritten note on diner napkin paper. You might have just saved my company. I won't forget this. EC tucked behind the card were $500 bills. Clara's hands shook as she stared at the money. Tips at Riverside ran between $3 and $8 on a good day. This was a month's rent. More than that, it was proof that the last hour had actually happened. You okay, hun? Clara looked up to find Donna, the morning cook, watching her from the kitchen window. She was 63, built like a fire hydrant, and had been working at Riverside since before Clara was born. Yeah, Clara managed. I'm okay. But she wasn't. Not really. Because for the first time in 6 years, the carefully maintained wall between who she was and who she'd almost been had cracked wide open. And standing in the gap was a man she'd known for less than an hour, whose problems were too big and whose eyes were too familiar. Clara folded the bills carefully and tucked them into her apron pocket. The business card went into her wallet. She told herself she'd never use it, that this was a one-time thing, a strange morning that would fade into the background noise of coffee pours and small talk. She told herself that right up until the moment, 3 days later, when Ethan Calloway walked back into Riverside Diner. This time he looked different. Still tired, but the desperation had been replaced by something sharper. He spotted Clara immediately and walked straight to her station. We won, he said without preamble. The board gave us 60 days. Clara's heart jumped. They went for it? Your idea bought us breathing room. We've already signed 2 licensing deals. Microsoft and Oracle. $22 million combined, cash up front. His eyes were bright now, alive in a way they hadn't been before. I told my legal team it came from a consultant. They don't need to know the consultant works in a diner. Clara felt something warm and complicated bloom in her chest. I'm glad it worked. It's working. Present tense. We're not out of the woods yet. Ethan shifted his weight, and for the first time, Clara saw uncertainty cross his face. That's actually why I'm here. You need more free financial advice? She meant it as a joke, but it came out strange. No, I need to hire you. The words hung in the air between them. Clara's brain stuttered to a stop. What? I need someone who can think like you did. Someone who sees angles the MBA suits miss. Ethan's hands were in his pockets now, his posture almost nervous. I'm offering you a position, strategic consultant, 60-day contract to start, renewable if this works out. Salary's negotiable, but I'm thinking 6 figures. Clara couldn't breathe. You're not serious. I'm completely serious. You don't even know me. I know you took one look at numbers that made 6 experienced analysts recommend surrender, and you found a way forward. His voice was steady now, certain. I know you're wasting your potential in this place. And I know I need someone in my corner who actually gives a damn about saving this company instead of just covering their own ass. Clara's mind raced. 6 figures. 60 days. A chance to use her brain for something other than remembering who ordered decaf. It was impossible. Insane. Everything she'd stopped letting herself want years ago. I'm a waitress, she said weakly. You're a strategist who happens to be waitressing. Ethan pulled out another business card, this one with a phone number written on the back. Think about it. Call me when you decide. He left the card on the counter and walked toward the door. Clara watched him go, her thoughts spinning so fast she felt dizzy. Ethan, she called out. He turned. Why me? For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then, quietly, because when everyone else told me to give up, you told me to fight. I need more of that. The door chimed as he left. Clara stood frozen, the business card burning a hole in her palm. Her entire life suddenly balanced on an edge she hadn't seen coming. Donna appeared at her elbow. Who the hell was that? Clara swallowed hard. Trouble? Maybe? Good trouble or bad trouble? That was the question, wasn't it? Clara looked down at the card, at the phone number that could change everything or ruin what little stability she'd managed to build. I don't know yet, she whispered. But even as she said it, she knew she was lying. She'd already made the decision. It had been made the moment Ethan Calloway first asked her opinion and actually listened to the answer. The moment she'd remembered what it felt like to use her mind for something bigger than herself. She'd call him. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But she'd call. Because some doors, once opened even a crack, couldn't be closed again. And Clara Whitmore was done pretending she didn't want to know what was on the other side. Clara waited until her shift ended before making the call. She sat in her car in the Riverside parking lot, the business card pinched between her fingers like it might disintegrate. Her thumb hovered over the phone screen for a full minute before she finally pressed dial. Ethan answered on the second ring. Calloway. It's Clara Whitmore. A pause. Then his voice shifted, warming slightly. You're calling. I'm calling. She took a breath. When would you need me to start? Tomorrow too soon? Her stomach flipped. That's soon. I know, but we're on a clock here, Clara. Every day counts. She heard papers rustling in the background, voices murmuring. He was probably still at the office, probably hadn't left since their conversation. Can you do it? Could she? Clara stared through the windshield at the diner's neon sign, the chipped paint on the window frames, the spot where she parked every morning at 5:30. She'd worked there for 6 years, built something resembling a life around predictable shifts and small paychecks. Walking away meant burning that safety net with no guarantee the fall wouldn't kill her. Clara? Yeah, she heard herself say. Tomorrow works. The relief in his voice was palpable. Good. Come to the office at 9. I'll have security clear you. He rattled off an address in the financial district, the kind of building Clara had only ever seen from the outside. And Clara? Bring your brain. We're going to need it. He hung up before she could second-guess herself. Clara sat in the silence of her car, her heart hammering against her ribs. What had she just agreed to? She was a college dropout who balanced diner receipts and occasionally helped regulars with their taxes. Strategic consultant for a multi-million-dollar tech company wasn't exactly a lateral move. Her phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Wear whatever you want. Half my team shows up in hoodies anyway. Despite everything, Clara smiled. The next morning, she stood outside the glass tower that housed Calloway Technologies and seriously considered turning around. The building was all sleek lines and reflective surfaces, the kind of place where people wore badges and spoke in acronyms. Through the lobby windows, she could see marble floors, modern art installations, a security desk that looked more complicated than her entire apartment. She was wearing her nicest pair of slacks and a blouse she'd bought 3 years ago for a job interview that never panned out. Next to the steady stream of employees flowing through the revolving doors in their designer suits and calculated casual wear, she felt like a kid playing dress-up. You look like you're about to bolt. Clara spun around. Ethan stood behind her, holding 2 paper coffee cups. He'd traded the wrinkled suit for dark jeans and a button-down with the sleeves rolled up. He looked less like a CEO and more like someone who'd just wandered out of a very expensive coffee shop. "I'm not bolting," Clara said, but her voice wavered. "Sure." He held out one of the cups. "Here, you're going to need this." She took it automatically. The cup was warm against her palms, grounding. "I don't know what I'm doing here." "Neither did I when I started this company." Ethan gestured toward the entrance. "Come on, before you overthink yourself into a panic attack." The lobby was exactly as intimidating as it looked from outside. Their footsteps echoed on the marble as Ethan led her past the security desk with a quick wave. The guard nodded back without asking questions. Apparently, when you owned the building, you didn't need to explain bringing in strays. The elevator ride to the 14th floor was silent, except for the soft jazz piped through hidden speakers. Clara watched the numbers climb and tried to remember how to breathe normally. "Fair warning," Ethan said as the doors slid open. "My team is going to have questions." "What kind of questions?" "The who the hell is this person and why is she here kind?" He stepped out into a sprawling open office space. Heads turned. Conversations paused mid-sentence. "Just let me handle it." Clara followed him through a maze of desks and glass-walled conference rooms. People stared. Not hostile exactly, but curious in a way that made her skin prickle. She caught fragments of whispered conversations, saw the quick glances being traded. By lunch, everyone in the building would know she existed. By dinner, they'd probably have theories. Ethan's office occupied the corner of the floor, all windows and minimalist furniture. A massive desk held 3 monitors, stacks of papers, and a framed photo Clara couldn't quite see. He set his coffee down and turned to face her. "Okay, ground rules." He counted on his fingers. 1. You report directly to me. Nobody else gets to tell you what to do. 2. If someone gives you shit, you come to me immediately. 3. You speak up when you see a problem. I didn't bring you here to nod politely. Clara swallowed. "What if I'm wrong?" "Then you're wrong. We'll fix it." His eyes met hers, steady and serious. "But so far, your track record's better than most of the people I'm paying $600 an hour." Before Clara could respond, the office door swung open. A woman in her mid-40s strode in, tablet in hand, radiating the kind of controlled energy that came from running on caffeine and spite. She stopped short when she saw Clara. "Who's this?" "Michelle, meet Clara Whitmore, our new strategic consultant." Ethan's voice was casual, but Clara heard the steel underneath. "Clara, this is Michelle Torres, my CFO. She's brilliant and terrifying in equal measure." Michelle's eyes narrowed. "Strategic consultant." "That's what I said." "We didn't discuss hiring anyone new." "I'm discussing it now." Ethan leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "Clara's the one who came up with the licensing strategy. I want her on the team while we execute it." Something shifted in Michelle's expression. Not quite approval, but maybe the absence of immediate rejection. She looked at Clara with new attention, like reassessing a chess piece she'd initially dismissed. "You're the diner waitress." Heat flooded Clara's face. Yes. David mentioned you. Said Ethan had some mystery consultant who pulled the licensing idea out of thin air." Michelle's head tilted. "You really come up with that in 20 minutes over breakfast?" "More like 10, Clara admitted. The other 10 minutes was reading the balance sheet." A ghost of a smile crossed Michelle's face. "Well, that's either impressive or insane." She glanced at Ethan. "Board meeting's in an hour. You ready?" "Getting there." Ethan gestured to the papers on his desk. "Updated projections?" "On your email. We're showing $22 million immediate cash from Microsoft and Oracle, projected at another $30 to $40 million if we can close the deals with Amazon and SAP." Michelle's fingers danced across her tablet. "It's good. Not great, but good enough to keep the wolves at bay for now." "What about Reed's embezzlement? Are we still bleeding?" "Forensic accounting found another $6 million in fake contracts. We've frozen what we can, but most of it's gone." Michelle's jaw tightened. "FBI's involved now. They're optimistic about recovery, but I'm not holding my breath." Clara watched the exchange like a tennis match, trying to keep up. The numbers were staggering. The casual way they discussed millions made her head spin. This wasn't theoretical anymore. This was real money, real problems, real consequences if they failed. "Clara, She jumped. Ethan was watching her. You okay? Yeah, just processing. You'll get used to it. He pushed off the desk. Michelle, give Clara access to everything. Financial reports, projections, contract templates. I want her up to speed by end of day. Michelle's eyebrows rose. Everything? Everything. Ethan, we barely know her. I know enough. His voice went flat the way it had in the diner when he talked about his daughter. She saw a way forward when nobody else did. That buys a lot of trust in my book. Michelle and Ethan stared at each other for a long moment, some silent conversation Clara wasn't privy to. Finally, Michelle sighed. Fine, but if this blows up, I'm saying I told you so. She turned to Clara. Come on, I'll get you set up with system access. Try not to break anything. The next 4 hours passed in a blur. Michelle walked Clara through Callaway Technologies' entire financial structure with the enthusiasm of someone explaining a root canal. Revenue streams, cost centers, R&D budgets, investor relations. Clara's brain struggled to absorb it all, years of disuse making everything take twice as long as it should. But slowly pieces started clicking into place. The company's architecture made sense once she understood the foundation. The tech patents were the crown jewels. Everything else existed to protect and monetize them. The embezzlement had gutted the operating budget, but the core assets were intact. It was like a house with a solid foundation but holes in the roof. Fixable, if they moved fast enough. You're actually getting this, aren't you? Michelle said around hour 3, watching Clara work through a spreadsheet. Clara looked up. Is that surprising? Little bit, yeah. Michelle leaned back in her chair. They'd moved to a small conference room after her office got too cramped. Most consultants we bring in spend the first week pretending to understand while secretly Googling everything. You're actually engaging. I studied this stuff a long time ago. Clara hesitated. Before life got complicated. Life has a way of doing that. Michelle's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, I think Ethan's instinct about you is right. He doesn't trust people easily. If he's vouching for you this hard, there's a reason. Clara didn't know what to say to that. She focused on the laptop screen, tracking the thread of a particularly convoluted vendor contract. The board meeting happened without her. Ethan had made it clear she wasn't ready for that particular Shark Tank yet. Clara waited in the conference room, working through financial models and trying not to imagine all the ways the presentation could go wrong. Michelle had disappeared an hour ago, presumably to back Ethan up. The office had gone quiet, everyone holding their breath. When Ethan finally reappeared, his face was unreadable. Clara's stomach dropped. How bad? She asked. We got our 60 days. He collapsed into the chair across from her. Barely. Roberts wanted to call for an immediate vote on the Titan Corp merger. It took some creative arguing to convince them to wait. But they agreed? Conditional agreement. We show progress every 2 weeks or they revisit the merger discussion. Ethan rubbed his eyes. So basically, we're on probation. Clara absorbed that. What's the next move? Close more licensing deals, fast. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through emails. We've got calls scheduled with Amazon, SAP, and 3 smaller players. If we can land even 2 of them, we'll have enough breathing room to start fixing the structural problems. The holes in the roof. He glanced up. What? Nothing. Just... Clara gestured at the financial report spread across the table. I was thinking of the company like a house. Strong foundation, but the roof's leaking. We need to patch it before winter hits. Ethan stared at her for a moment, then laughed. It was the first genuine laugh she'd heard from him. That's exactly what it is. He shook his head. How long were you in finance school? 3 years. I was 6 months from my master's when I had to drop out. Why'd you leave? The question landed heavier than he'd probably intended. Claire kept her eyes on the laptop screen. My mom got sick, cancer. Someone needed to take care of her, pay the bills. The degree could wait. Did she? Ethan stopped himself. Sorry, that's too personal. She died 2 years later. Claire's voice came out flat, factual. She'd learned to talk about it that way. Emotions made people uncomfortable. By then, I'd been out of school too long. Couldn't afford to go back, couldn't get the kind of job that would have made the degree worth it anyway. So I waitressed. Silence filled the space between them. When Clara finally looked up, Ethan's expression had shifted into something complicated. Understanding, maybe. Or recognition. My wife died when our daughter was 3, he said quietly. Car accident, drunk driver ran a red light. Clara's breath caught. Ethan, Don't. He held up a hand. I'm not telling you for sympathy. I'm telling you because I know what it's like when life takes a left turn and you end up somewhere you never planned to be. His eyes met hers. And I know what it's like to finally get a chance to take the wheel again. Something passed between them in that moment. Not attraction, exactly. More like resonance. Two people who'd been broken by circumstances recognizing the cracks in each other. Your daughter, Clara said. What's her name? Lily. The way his whole face changed when he said it made Clara's chest ache. She's 7, smart as hell, and twice as stubborn. She knows about the company problems? She knows I've been working a lot. Doesn't know why. Ethan's jaw tightened. I'm trying to keep it from her as long as possible. She's already lost enough. Clara understood that instinct, the desperate need to protect someone from the weight you carried. She'd felt it with her mother, pretending everything was fine even as the medical bills piled up and the savings account drained to nothing. We should get back to work, Ethan said, straightening in his chair. The vulnerable moment passed, shuttered behind professional distance. I want you to sit in on the Amazon call tomorrow. Just listen, take notes, see how these negotiations work. Okay? And Clara? He stood gathering papers. Thank you for taking the risk. She wanted to tell him the risk felt mutual, that she was terrified of failing him, of proving she wasn't as capable as one lucky insight had made her seem. But instead, she just nodded. Don't thank me yet, she said. We've still got 59 days to go. The Amazon call the next morning was a masterclass in corporate warfare disguised as polite conversation. Clara sat in the corner of Ethan's office, laptop open, watching him negotiate with the kind of focused intensity she was starting to recognize as his default mode. We're prepared to offer exclusive licensing for the core AI framework, Ethan was saying, his voice smooth and confident. 18-month term, regional restrictions apply. Price point is $15 million for the package. The voice on the speakerphone belonged to someone named Janet Reeves, Amazon's VP of Technology Acquisitions. She sounded bored. That's steep for unproven technology. Unproven? Ethan's eyebrow arched. Our framework is currently powering infrastructure for 2 Fortune 500 companies and has a 99.6% uptime record. I'd call that pretty proven. And yet you're shopping it around like a fire sale. Clara saw Ethan's hand tighten on his pen. Michelle, who joined them for the call, shot him a warning look. We're strategically expanding our licensing portfolio, Michelle cut in smoothly. This is about market positioning, not desperation. Right. Janet didn't sound convinced. Look, I'll be straight with you. We know about the embezzlement. We know your board's breathing down your neck. We're interested in the tech, but not at inflated prices when you're negotiating from weakness. The silence that followed felt like a held breath. Clara watched Ethan's face, saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. He was about to say something sharp, something that would tank the deal. She recognized that look from the diner, the moment right before someone stopped caring about consequences. She didn't think, just acted. What if we restructured the terms? Clara heard herself say. 3 pairs of eyes snapped to her. Ethan's expression flickered between surprise and something that might have been irritation. Michelle looked like she'd just watched a car crash. Clara's heart hammered, but she kept talking. Instead of a flat licensing fee, we could do a hybrid model. Lower upfront cost, say $8 million, plus a percentage of revenue generated using our framework. That way Amazon's initial risk is reduced, but we participate in the upside if the technology performs as well as we know it will. Janet's voice came back cautious, interested. What kind of percentage? 4% of gross revenue from products utilizing the licensed technology, capped at $25 million over the term. That could end up costing us significantly more than 15. Only if it works. Clara's palms were sweating, but her voice stayed steady. If the tech underperforms, you've paid less than half what we originally asked. If it succeeds, we both win. That's not weakness. That's confidence. Another silence. Ethan was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Michelle had her hand over her mouth, eyes wide. That's Janet paused. Actually interesting. Who am I speaking with? Clara Whitmore, strategic consultant. Well, Clara Whitmore, you just made this conversation worth having again. The sound of typing filtered through the speaker. Send me the revised proposal with those terms. I'll run it past our team. We'll have it to you by end of business, Michelle said, finding her voice. Good. Talk soon. The line clicked dead. The office exploded into motion. Michelle was already pulling up contract templates, muttering numbers under her breath. Ethan stood frozen, his eyes still locked on Clara. What the hell was that? He finally said. Clara's confidence evaporated. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have jumped in. I just thought, that was brilliant. Ethan's face broke into a grin. Absolutely brilliant. The hybrid model solves their risk problem and gives us better long-term upside. Why didn't we think of that? Because we were too busy thinking like people who needed cash yesterday, Michelle said, typing furiously. Clara's thinking like someone with nothing to lose and everything to prove. She glanced up. No offense. None taken. Clara's heart was still racing. Did I really just negotiate with Amazon? You really just did. Ethan laughed, running his hands through his hair. Michelle, how fast can we model out the revenue projections on a 4% structure? Give me an hour. You've got 30 minutes. I want this proposal perfect before it hits Janet's desk. He turned to Clara. You. With me. He didn't wait for a response, just strode out of the office. Clara scrambled to follow, nearly tripping over her own feet. Ethan led her through the office maze to a break room that overlooked the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a view of steel and glass towers climbing toward gray clouds. You're shaking, Ethan observed. Clara looked down at her hands. He was right. Adrenaline crash. Happens to everyone after their first big call. He pulled 2 bottles of water from the fridge, handed her one. You did good in there. Really good. I spoke without thinking. That was stupid. That was instinct. There's a difference. Ethan leaned against the counter. Most of my team overthinks everything to the point of paralysis. You saw an opening and took it. That's valuable. Clara twisted the cap off her water bottle, buying time to process. What if Amazon says no? Then we try the next company on the list. He shrugged. But they won't say no. You gave them exactly what they needed, a way to say yes without looking desperate themselves. How do you know? Because I've been doing this long enough to recognize a winning hand when I see one. Ethan's expression grew serious. Clara, I need you to understand something. This isn't charity. I didn't hire you because I felt sorry for the waitress with the sad story. I hired you because you're smart and you see things differently than people who've been swimming in corporate culture for 20 years. I haven't done anything yet. You've done more in 2 days than some consultants manage in 6 months. He met her eyes. Trust me on this. You belong here. The words settled into Clara's chest, warm and terrifying. She wanted to believe him, wanted to think she could actually pull this off, that the skills gathering dust in her brain for 6 years could still matter. But belief required hope, and hope had let her down too many times. We should get back, she said instead. Michelle's going to need help with those projections. If Ethan noticed her deflection, he didn't push. They walked back to his office in comfortable silence, the kind that felt earned rather than awkward. The rest of the day blurred into spreadsheets and conference calls. Clara helped Michelle build the revenue models, learning the CFO's shorthand and peculiar organizational system. They worked well together once Michelle stopped treating her like a potential disaster waiting to happen. By the time they sent the revised proposal to Amazon at 4:47 p.m., Clara's eyes burned and her shoulders ached from hunching over the laptop. Go home, Michelle said, logging out of her computer. You've earned it. What about you? I've got 2 more hours of cleanup work. Budget reconciliation. She waved Clara toward the door. Seriously, go, before Ethan finds something else for you to do. Clara didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed her bag and headed for the elevators, exhausted in a way she hadn't felt in years. Her brain felt scraped raw, every synapse firing overtime to keep up. But underneath the fatigue was something else, something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. The elevator doors opened to reveal Ethan standing inside, phone pressed to his ear. He motioned for her to join him. Not negotiable, David. I don't care what the insurance company says. His voice was sharp with frustration. My daughter needs physical therapy twice a week, not once. Find a way to make it happen. Clara's chest tightened. She stared at the elevator buttons, pretending not to listen. Ethan hung up as they reached the lobby. Sorry, that was my attorney. Insurance problems. For Lily? She was in the car when my wife died, broke her leg in 3 places. His jaw worked. It healed wrong. She's needed PT ever since to keep the muscles from atrophying. Clara didn't know what to say. The weight of that revelation, a 7-year-old carrying physical scars from losing her mother, made her throat close up. Anyway, Ethan shook his head like clearing it. You did great today. Get some rest. They walked out into the cooling evening air together. The city was shifting from business hours to something looser, sidewalks filling with people heading to bars or restaurants or home. Clara felt displaced, like she existed between 2 worlds now, the one where she served coffee at dawn and the one where she negotiated million-dollar deals in glass towers. Clara, she turned. Ethan stood with his hands in his pockets, looking suddenly uncertain in a way that didn't match his usual controlled presence. Yeah? Thank you for caring about this. His eyes held hers. I know you're still figuring out if you trust yourself in this role, but I want you to know I don't have doubts. Not about you. Before she could respond, he turned and headed toward the parking garage. Clara stood on the sidewalk, her heart doing complicated things, until the evening crowd swallowed him from view. She made it home to her tiny apartment and collapsed on the couch without bothering to turn on lights. Her phone buzzed. Email from Michelle. Amazon proposal acknowledged. Response expected within 48 hours. 48 hours. 2 days to find out if Clara's instinct had been genius or disaster. She closed her eyes and let exhaustion pull her under, dreaming of numbers and percentages and a little girl with a broken leg who needed her father to save the world. Amazon's response came 31 hours later, not 48. Clara was in the middle of reviewing SAP's preliminary interest letter when her laptop pinged with the email notification. Her hands froze over the keyboard. Michelle, she called across the conference room they'd essentially taken over. It's here. Michelle's head snapped up from her own screen. Amazon? Clara nodded, her pulse accelerating. Michelle was around the table in 3 strides, leaning over Clara's shoulder to read. The email was short, corporate polite, and ended with 3 words that made Clara's breath catch. We're moving forward. Holy shit, Michelle breathed. They went for it. They want to finalize terms by Friday. Clara scrolled down, scanning the particulars. $8 million up front, 4% revenue share, 18-month exclusive license with option to extend. Michelle grabbed her phone. Ethan needs to see this now. But Ethan was already pushing through the conference room door, his phone in hand. Amazon just called me directly. Janet wants a signature meeting tomorrow in Seattle. Tomorrow? Clara's stomach lurched. That's fast. I know. Ethan's eyes were bright, energized in a way Clara was learning meant he was running on pure adrenaline and coffee. She's worried we'll shop the same terms to other buyers and dilute the exclusivity. Wants to lock it down before we change our minds. Michelle was already typing. I'll get legal on the contract language. We need to make sure the revenue share calculations are airtight. And I need Clara on that flight to Seattle. Ethan's gaze cut to her. You started this deal. You should be there to close it. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. I've never been to Seattle. Good. Neither has our licensing strategy. The corner of his mouth lifted. Flight leaves at 6 a.m. Pack light. He was gone before Clara could formulate a proper response, leaving her staring at Michelle with what must have been naked panic on her face. Breathe, Michelle said, not unkindly. You'll be fine. I don't have anything to wear to a meeting with Amazon executives. Wear what you wore today. They're tech people, not fashion critics. Michelle returned to her laptop. Just don't spill coffee on anyone important, and you'll do better than half the consultants I've seen. Clara looked down at her slacks and blouse. The same rotation of professional adjacent clothing she'd been cycling through all week. It would have to do. Everything would have to do, because ready or not, she was about to negotiate a multi-million-dollar deal in a city she'd never visited for a company she'd worked at for less than a week. The absurdity of it should have been paralyzing. Instead, Clara felt something fierce and unfamiliar uncurling in her chest. It might have been excitement, The flight to Seattle left on time, which Ethan said was a minor miracle. They'd flown first class, Claire's first time experiencing legroom that didn't require contortion, and spent most of the 2-hour journey reviewing contract language and prepping for possible negotiation points. Ethan worked with the focused intensity of someone who'd learned to function on minimal sleep. His laptop balanced on the tray table, fingers flying across keys. "Janet's going to push back on the revenue cap," he said without looking up. "$25 million over 18 months is aggressive. She'll want it higher or eliminate it entirely." Clara made a note on her tablet. "What's our floor?" $30 million cap, but only if they increase the upfront to 10. Ethan rubbed his eyes. "The revenue share is our long-term play. We can't give away too much leverage on the cap. What if we structured it with performance milestones instead?" Clara was thinking out loud now, the way she'd learned to do over the past few days. The cap increases incrementally based on adoption rates, gives them incentive to actually deploy the technology aggressively rather than sitting on it. Ethan stopped typing, looked at her. "Say that again." Clara's confidence wavered under his stare. "It's just an idea." "No, it's good. Really good." He was already opening a new document. Tiered caps based on implementation metrics. If they hit certain deployment targets, the ceiling raises, aligns our incentives with theirs. They spent the rest of the flight hammering out the framework. By the time the plane touched down in Seattle, Clara's head was spinning with numbers and contingencies, but the structure felt solid. More importantly, it felt like something they'd built together. The Amazon campus was everything Clara had imagined, and nothing like she'd expected. Sprawling glass buildings connected by covered walkways, green spaces carved between corporate architecture, people moving with purposeful energy. Their meeting was in Building 7, a conference room on the 3rd floor that overlooked some kind of employee park complete with food trucks and picnic tables. Janet Reeves turned out to be a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and the kind of direct eye contact that made Clara want to confess things she hadn't done. She greeted Ethan with a handshake that looked like it hurt and turned to Clara with undisguised curiosity. "So you're the consultant who rebuilt our deal?" Clara forced herself not to fidget. "I just offered a different perspective. Perspective's worth money in this business." Janet gestured to the conference table. "Let's see if it's worth $8 million. The next 2 hours were the most intense of Clara's life. Janet had brought her own team, lawyers, technical analysts, a finance guy who looked like he'd been calculating risk since birth. They picked apart every clause, questioned every assumption, pushed back on terms Clara had thought were settled. Ethan held the line with calm authority, but Clara could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened when Janet's legal team tried to slip in language that would have given Amazon too much control. It was Clara who caught the poison pill buried in Section 12, a clause that would have allowed Amazon to sublicense the technology to third parties under certain conditions, effectively breaking their exclusivity promise. "This doesn't work," she said, her finger on the paragraph in question. Everyone stopped talking and looked at her. Clara's mouth went dry, but she pushed forward. "Section 12, subsection C. The language about strategic partnerships is too vague. You could drive a truck through that definition." Janet's lawyer, a severe man named Patterson, frowned. "That's standard boilerplate for enterprise licensing." "Maybe. But our exclusivity isn't standard." Clara met his gaze, refusing to back down. "If you want sole access to this framework, we need clear limitations on what constitutes a strategic partnership versus a sublicense." "She's right," Ethan said quietly. "That clause needs revision or removal." Patterson looked at Janet. Janet looked at Clara. The silence stretched like taffy. "Fine," Janet finally said. "We'll tighten the language, but I want the tiered cap structure you mentioned on the plane." Clara blinked. "How did you—" "Ethan texted me the framework 2 hours ago." Janet's expression might have been amusement. "I like the incentive alignment, but the deployment targets need to be realistic. You're asking for 30% adoption in 6 months. That's aggressive." 25%, Clara countered, the number coming from somewhere instinctive. "With a graduated timeline, 15% at 3 months, 25 at 6, 35 at 12. "Done." Janet extended her hand across the table. "Welcome to the big leagues, Ms. Whitmore." Clara shook it, feeling like she was in a dream. Ethan's hand landed briefly on her shoulder, warm, grounding, before he moved to finalize details with Janet's team. They signed the contracts at 4:47 p.m. Pacific Time. $8 million transferred into Callaway Technologies accounts with the click of a button and enough digital signatures to wallpaper a small room. Clara watched it happen with a strange sense of unreality, like she was observing someone else's life. By the time they left the Amazon campus, Seattle's famous clouds had rolled in, turning the sky the color of old bruises. Ethan was on his phone immediately, updating Michelle on the closed deal, fielding questions from the legal team. Clara walked beside him in silence, her brain too full to process conversation. Their return flight wasn't until morning, something about Ethan needing to meet with another potential client in the area. He'd booked them rooms at a hotel near the airport, efficient and anonymous. They grabbed dinner at the hotel restaurant, a quiet corner table where the lighting was dim and the other patrons were mostly business travelers staring at their phones. "You were incredible today," Ethan said after they'd ordered. He'd finally put his phone down, giving her his full attention. "The way you caught that sub-licensing clause. Patterson's been doing corporate law for 20 years and he thought he could slip that past us." Clara pushed her water glass in small circles on the table. "I almost didn't say anything. Thought maybe I was reading it wrong. But you trusted your gut." Ethan leaned back. "That's the difference between people who succeed and people who don't. The willingness to speak up when you see something wrong. Is that what you did when you started the company? Among other things." His expression shifted, becoming distant. "I was 22, fresh out of college with a computer science degree and ideas that seemed impossible. Everyone said I was crazy to turn down job offers from Google and Microsoft to start my own thing. Obviously, they were wrong. They were right for about 3 years. I burned through my savings, slept on friends' couches, ate ramen until I couldn't look at noodles without wanting to throw up." He smiled, but it was edged with something sharper. "Then I met Rachel, my wife. She was working at a coffee shop while finishing her master's in education. She believed in what I was building even when I didn't." Clara heard the past tense, felt the weight of it. "She helped you?" "She kept me sane, reminded me why I started in the first place when I wanted to quit." Ethan's hands wrapped around his water glass. "We got married the same month I landed my first major investor. Had Lily 2 years later, built the company, built a life. Then one night some asshole decided driving drunk was a good idea and..." He stopped, didn't finish, didn't need to. "I'm sorry," Clara said softly. "Everyone's sorry doesn't change anything." His voice was flat, factual. "I had a 3-year-old daughter and a company that needed me to function, so I functioned. Hired a nanny, worked 16-hour days, pretended I wasn't falling apart. That must have been impossible." "It was Tuesday." He looked up at her. "You know what I mean. When life breaks you and you don't get the luxury of staying broken because someone depends on you." Clara nodded. She did know. Had lived it with her mother, those last months when every day was a choice between grief and survival, and there wasn't room for both. Their food arrived. They ate in comfortable silence, the kind that felt earned rather than awkward. Clara studied Ethan when he wasn't looking, the lines around his eyes, the careful way he held himself, like a man who'd learned not to let his guard down. She recognized that posture, wore it herself most days. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said eventually. "Sure." "Why finance?" "Originally, I mean, before everything went sideways." Clara considered the question. "I like that numbers don't lie. You can trust them to add up the same way every time. People are unpredictable, markets are chaos. But math is math." That's a pretty cynical worldview for someone in their early 20s. "My dad left when I was 12, cleaned out the bank account and disappeared. My mom worked 3 jobs to keep us fed." Claire's fingers traced the rim of her plate. "I learned early that stability was something you built yourself. Finance seemed like a way to do that. And then your mom got sick. And then she got sick." Clara met his eyes. "Turns out stability's just another word for temporary, but you already know that." Ethan's expression softened into something Clara couldn't quite name. Understanding, maybe, or recognition. "We're a pair, aren't we?" "A pair of what?" "People who got knocked down and are still trying to figure out if we're allowed to stand back up." The observation landed with uncomfortable accuracy. Clara looked away first, focusing on her half-eaten dinner. "I should probably get some sleep. Early flight tomorrow." If Ethan noticed her deflection, he didn't push. They split the check. Clara insisted, even though she knew he could have bought the entire restaurant without blinking, and headed to their separate rooms. Clara lay awake for hours afterwards, staring at the ceiling, thinking about broken things and whether they ever really healed or just learned to function around the cracks. The return flight was quieter. Ethan worked. Clara pretended to work while actually processing everything that had happened in the last 36 hours. By the time they landed back home, Michelle was waiting with news. SAP had agreed to preliminary terms, and 2 smaller companies were circling with interest. The licensing strategy was working. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of conference calls, contract negotiations, and late nights in the office. Clara fell into a rhythm she hadn't known existed, up at 5, in the office by 7, drowning in financial models and licensing frameworks until her eyes crossed. It was exhausting and exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. She also started to understand the ecosystem of Callaway Technologies. The office politics, the power dynamics, the way information flowed through unofficial channels faster than official ones. Some people welcomed her. Others treated her like a threat or a curiosity. Most just seemed confused about who she was and why Ethan trusted her. The board meeting at the 4-week mark was Clara's first real exposure to the people who held Ethan's future in their hands. She sat in the back of the conference room while Ethan presented progress. 3 major licensing deals closed, 2 more in final negotiations, cash flow stabilized, operating budget back in the black. The numbers were good, better than good. But the board members, 9 men and women in expensive suits and practiced poker faces, didn't look impressed. They looked skeptical. "The licensing strategy is a band-aid," said a man named Roberts, mid-60s with silver hair and the kind of voice that expected to be obeyed. "You're generating revenue, I'll grant you that, but you haven't addressed the fundamental weakness in your financial controls. Marcus Reed embezzled $47 million under your watch, Ethan. What's to stop it happening again?" Clara saw Ethan's jaw tighten. "We've implemented new oversight protocols, quarterly audits, dual signature requirements on large transactions, external review of vendor contracts." "Closing the barn door after the horse is gone," interrupted a woman named Chen. "The investors are nervous. Titan Corp's offer is still on the table. A merger would stabilize everything and remove you from the liability equation." "It would also destroy everything we've built," Ethan shot back. "Titan Corp doesn't want to partner. They want to strip our IP and eliminate a competitor." "Then perhaps you should have been more careful about who you trusted with your finances." Roberts leaned forward. "This company needs experienced leadership, not a CEO playing hero while the ship sinks." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Clara watched Ethan's hands curl into fists beneath the table, watched him fight to keep his expression neutral. "We have 4 weeks left in the provisional period," Michelle cut in smoothly. "The board agreed to 60 days. We're showing measurable progress. Shutting down now would be premature." "We're expressing concerns," Chen said. "Concerns that will need to be addressed before we consider extending beyond the 60-day window." The meeting concluded without resolution, which felt like a defeat even though nothing had technically been decided. Ethan stormed back to his office, with Michelle and Clara trailing behind. He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. "They want me gone," he said flatly. "Roberts has been pushing for the Titan Corp merger since before Marcus's arrest. This is just his excuse." "Then we don't give him ammunition." Michelle's voice was steel. "We close the remaining deals, show revenue growth, prove the financial controls are working, make it impossible for them to justify a merger. And if that's not enough, then we find new board members." Michelle crossed her arms. "You still hold majority voting shares, Ethan. They can't force anything without your consent. Unless they convince the investors I'm a liability, then the shares don't matter." Ethan rubbed his face. "I've seen this play before. Roberts will whisper in the right ears, plant seeds of doubt. By the time the 60 days are up, half the investor base will be demanding my head." Clara had been silent, watching the exchange, but something Roberts had said kept circling in her mind, demanding attention. "What if you brought in outside validation?" she heard herself say. Both of them looked at her. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. "Roberts is questioning your judgment, your ability to lead." Clara's thoughts were racing now, connecting dots. "But he can't question independent analysis. What if we hired a third-party firm to audit the company's financial health and operational structure? Someone with credibility, no connection to us. Let them verify that the licensing strategy is sound and the new controls are effective. Michelle's eyes narrowed. That's actually not a terrible idea. If we get a clean bill of health from someone like Deloitte or PwC, it takes the wind out of Roberts' sails. It also costs a fortune, Ethan said, less than losing the company. Clara met his gaze. And it shows confidence. You're not afraid of scrutiny because you know what they'll find. Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he started to nod. Set it up. Michelle, reach out to the top firms. I want proposals by end of week. On it. Michelle was already pulling out her phone. The audit process took 2 weeks and felt like undergoing surgery while conscious. Teams of accountants and analysts descended on Callaway Technologies, requesting documents, conducting interviews, examining every transaction from the past 3 years. Clara found herself fielding questions about the licensing deals, walking auditors through her revenue projections, defending assumptions that had seemed sound until professionals started poking holes. It was brutal. It was also strangely validating. The lead auditor, a woman named Susan Park from Ernst & Young, cornered Clara one afternoon in the conference room. These hybrid licensing models, Susan said, tapping her tablet. This was your design? Clara hesitated. I suggested the framework. Michelle and our legal team refined the execution. It's clever. Reduces buyer risk while maintaining upside potential. Susan's expression was professionally neutral. You have formal training in structured finance? Some. I didn't finish my degree. Pity, you've got good instincts. Susan made a note. We're going to recommend you for a compliance oversight role in our final report. Someone needs to be watching these licensing agreements long-term, making sure the revenue share calculations stay clean. Clara blinked. I'm just a consultant. Not anymore, you're not. Susan smiled slightly. Trust me, when this audit report hits, Ethan Callaway is going to want you permanent. The final audit results came back 3 days before the 60-day deadline. Clara was in Ethan's office when Michelle burst through the door, tablet in hand, face flushed. We got it, she said breathlessly. Clean opinion. They verified the licensing revenue, confirmed the new financial controls are industry standard, even praised the hybrid model structure as innovative. Ethan's expression didn't change. And they recommended continuing current leadership with the addition of enhanced board oversight. Michelle's grin was fierce. Roberts has nothing. The audit says you're doing everything right. For the first time in weeks, Claire saw Ethan's shoulders drop. Real relief flooded his face, making him look younger. Vulnerable. Send it to every board member, he said quietly, and every investor. I want them to see it before the final meeting. The meeting was scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. Clara wasn't invited. Consultant status didn't grant board meeting access. But she paced the office anyway, unable to focus on anything else. Michelle had disappeared into the meeting at 1:55, leaving Clara alone with her thoughts and a laptop full of financial models that suddenly felt meaningless. If the board voted for the merger, none of it mattered. The licensing deals, the audit, the late nights and early mornings. All of it would dissolve into Titan Corp's acquisition machine. 3 o'clock came and went, then 4. Clara's stomach twisted itself into knots. Long meetings usually meant arguments, which could go either way. At 4:42, her phone buzzed, a text from Ethan. Come to my office. Clara's heart hammered as she walked through the now quiet workspace. Most people had left early for the weekend, sensing the tension. Ethan's door was ajar. She knocked anyway. Come in. He was standing by the window, hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the city skyline. Michelle sat in one of the chairs, looking exhausted. What happened? Clara asked. Ethan turned. His face was unreadable. We won, he said simply. 7-2 vote against the merger. Roberts and Chen voted to proceed with Titan Corp, but they were outvoted. The relief hit Clara so hard she had to grab the back of a chair. You're staying. We're staying. Ethan's eyes found hers. The board granted a 6-month extension to continue the licensing strategy, subject to quarterly reviews. They're also requiring expanded financial oversight and monthly reporting. But you keep the company, Clara said. We keep the company. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Thanks to you. I didn't do anything. You did everything. Michelle stood, gathering her things. The hybrid licensing model, the audit idea, catching that Amazon sublicense clause. None of this works without you. She paused at the door. I'm heading home before my brain melts. You two should celebrate, or sleep, or whatever people do when they pull off miracles. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Silence filled the office. Clara stood frozen, suddenly acutely aware that she was alone with Ethan for the first time since Seattle. The energy between them felt different now, charged. I meant what I said, Ethan said quietly. This doesn't happen without you. You would have found another way. Maybe, but it wouldn't have been as good. He moved closer, not quite crossing into her personal space, but near enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the relief, the something else she didn't want to name. The board wants to make your position permanent, Director of Strategic Licensing, full salary, benefits, the works. Clara's breath caught. Ethan, you don't have to answer now. Think about it over the weekend. His hand lifted like he might touch her arm, then dropped. But Clara, I'm asking you to stay. Not because I need you, though I do, because you deserve this. The career, the challenge, the chance to use your brain for something that matters. She wanted to say yes. The word was right there, pressing against her teeth, but fear held it back. Fear of failing, of proving she was only lucky, of losing this fragile new life as quickly as she'd found it. I'll think about it, she whispered. Ethan nodded, accepting the non-answer. Go home. Get some rest. We'll talk Monday. Clara left before she could change her mind, before the walls she'd built around herself could crack any further. She made it to her car before the shaking started, the full weight of the last 8 weeks crashing down at once. They'd won. Against impossible odds, against a hostile board, against time itself. They'd actually won. And somewhere in the middle of saving Ethan's company, Clara realized she might have accidentally saved herself too. Clara didn't go home. She drove aimlessly through the city instead, taking turns without thinking, letting muscle memory guide her while her brain tried to process what had just happened. Director of Strategic Licensing. A real title. A real career. The kind of opportunity she'd stopped believing existed for people like her. People who'd stumbled off the path and spent years convincing themselves the detour was permanent. She found herself in the parking lot of Riverside Diner without consciously choosing the destination. The neon sign flickered against the darkening sky, exactly as it had every night for the past 6 years. Through the window, she could see Donna moving behind the counter, probably complaining about the dinner rush. A different waitress, Jenny, maybe, or the new girl whose name Clara could never remember, was taking orders at table 4. Clara's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. This is Michelle. Ethan gave me your contact. Congrats on not running screaming. Drinks next week to celebrate not dying? Despite everything, Clara smiled. She typed back, only if you're buying. The response came immediately. Deal. Fair warning, I'm a mean drunk and will absolutely tell you embarrassing Ethan stories. Clara sat in her car until the sky went fully dark, watching the diner through glass and distance. She should go in, say hello to Donna, maybe pick up a shift for old time's sake. But the thought of walking through that door felt like moving backward, and for the first time in years, Clara wanted to move forward. She drove home instead. Monday morning arrived cold and overcast, the kind of weather that matched Clara's anxiety. She'd spent the weekend cycling through every possible outcome of accepting Ethan's offer, each scenario more catastrophic than the last. What if she couldn't handle the pressure? What if the licensing deals fell apart? What if everyone realized she'd just gotten lucky and had no business pretending to be a strategic director? By the time she walked into Callaway Technologies at 7:15, she'd half convinced herself to decline the position and retreat to the relative safety of temporary consulting work. But Ethan was waiting by her desk. She had a desk now, somewhere between Michelle's office and the legal department, with 2 cups of coffee and an expression that suggested he hadn't slept much either. You look terrible, Clara said. You're not exactly fresh as a daisy yourself. He handed her one of the cups. Lily had a nightmare last night. Took 2 hours to get her back to sleep. The casual mention of his daughter caught Clara off guard. Ethan rarely talked about his personal life at the office, keeping that part of himself carefully compartmentalized. Is she okay? She's 7. Nightmares come with the territory. But his eyes were shadowed, worried in a way that had nothing to do with board meetings or licensing deals. Her therapist says they're getting worse, processing trauma, apparently, like her brain's finally catching up to what happened 3 years ago. Clara's chest tightened. That must be hard. For both of you. Ethan stopped, seemed to recalibrate. Sorry. That's not why I ambushed you at your desk. He set his coffee down, hands going to his pockets in that nervous gesture she'd learned meant he was about to say something important. Have you thought about the offer? Clara had thought about nothing else. Yeah. And? She should say yes. The rational part of her brain knew that. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, the kind of second chance people didn't get. But fear was louder than logic, and fear said she wasn't ready, wasn't good enough, would inevitably fail and prove everyone's doubts correct. I'm terrified, she admitted. I've been out of the game for 6 years, Ethan. I waitressed and paid bills and forgot how to be the person who could do this kind of work. What if I can't? You can. His voice was quiet but certain. I've watched you for 2 months now. You don't just understand the numbers, Clara. You understand the people behind them. That's rare. That matters. You barely know me. I know enough. He met her eyes. I know you see problems everyone else misses. I know you're willing to speak up even when you're scared. I know you care about getting it right more than looking smart. That's the person I want building the future of this company. Clara's throat felt tight. What if I let you down? Then we'll fix it and move forward. That's what teams do. Ethan's expression softened. Look, I get it. Trusting yourself after everything falls apart is damn near impossible. But you've already proven you can do this work. The only question is whether you're willing to bet on yourself. The words landed like a challenge, or maybe an invitation. Clara thought about the diner, about the careful life she'd built from broken pieces. Safe, predictable, small. Then she thought about the past 8 weeks, the rush of solving impossible problems, the satisfaction of watching her ideas become reality, the way her brain had woken up after years of sleep. Okay, she heard herself say. Yes, I'll take it. Ethan's face split into a grin that transformed him. Yeah? Don't make me repeat it before I change my mind. He laughed, the sound genuine and surprised. Michelle's going to be insufferable about being right. She bet me $20 you'd say yes. You bet against me? I bet on your self-preservation instinct. She bet on your ambition. His smile turned rueful. Turns out she knows you better than I thought. The moment hung between them, warm and complicated. Clara looked away first, focusing on her coffee cup. So what happens now? Now we make it official. HR paperwork, office assignment, team introductions. Michelle wants you sitting in on the executive strategy sessions. Ethan checked his phone. And we've got a licensing review meeting at 10. SAP's implementation metrics just came in. Just like that, they were back to business. Clara followed Ethan through the morning routine, signing documents that made her employment official, shaking hands with people whose names she'd have to memorize, claiming an office that felt too big for someone who'd been serving coffee 3 months ago. Michelle appeared around 9:30 with a bottle of champagne she'd apparently been hiding in her desk. We're not drinking at 9:30 in the morning, Ethan said. Fine. We'll save it for lunch. Michelle turned to Clara. Welcome to the permanent disaster that is Callaway Technologies. Your health insurance kicks in immediately, which you'll need for the stress-induced medical conditions. She's joking, Ethan said. I'm really not. Michelle's grin was sharp. But seriously, congrats. Try not to make me look bad. The SAP meeting revealed that their licensing deal was performing above projections. The tiered cap structure Clara had designed was working exactly as intended, with Amazon and SAP both hitting early deployment targets. Revenue was flowing in steady and predictable, the kind of cash flow that made balance sheets look healthy and boards less nervous. We should leverage this, Michelle said, pulling up spreadsheets. Use the success stories to court bigger fish. I'm thinking pharmaceutical companies, financial institutions, anyone who needs secure AI infrastructure. Clara studied the numbers, that familiar feeling of pieces clicking together sparking in her mind. What about government contracts? Both Ethan and Michelle looked at her. Explain, Ethan said. Federal agencies are starting to invest heavily in AI for data analysis, security applications. The licensing model works even better there because government procurement moves slow. They'd rather lease proven technology than develop in-house. Clara was thinking out loud now, following the thread. Plus, government contracts come with long-term stability. 3 to 5 year terms, built-in renewals. Michelle's fingers were already flying across her keyboard. That's actually brilliant. Government revenue would calm investor nerves better than anything else. It's as close to guaranteed money as exists. It's also a bureaucratic nightmare, Ethan said. Compliance requirements, security clearances, months of vetting. But you've got the infrastructure for it. Clara pulled up Callaway's technical specifications. Your security protocols already exceed most government standards. We'd need to get certified, maybe hire someone who knows federal procurement, but the foundation's there. Ethan leaned back, processing. This would be a 6-month build minimum, maybe longer. We've got 6 months before the next board review. Clara met his gaze. Might as well use it building something that makes us bulletproof. A slow smile crossed Ethan's face. Michelle, what's your calendar look like? About to get worse, apparently. Block out Thursday and Friday. We're going to D.C. He looked at Clara. You too. Hope you like government coffee and bureaucratic doublespeak. Clara's stomach flipped. I've never been to Washington. Great. Neither has our licensing division. Ethan was already texting someone. Time to change that. The next 2 weeks were a crash course in federal contracting. Clara learned acronyms that made her head spin. GSA, FAS, SA, FAR, DFARS, and sat through meetings with consultants who spoke in regulatory code. Ethan hired a former Department of Defense procurement officer named Marcus Chen, who talked like a lawyer and thought like a chess player. Together, they started building the framework for government licensing deals. It was overwhelming and exhausting, and Clara loved every minute of it. She also started to notice things she'd been too busy to see before. The way Ethan's phone always sat face up on his desk, ready for calls from Lily's school. The framed photo she'd glimpsed that first day turned out to be him and a small girl with dark curls and his same gray eyes, both laughing at something off camera. He left every day at 5:30 sharp, no exceptions, disappearing into whatever his life looked like outside these walls. Clara found herself curious about that life in ways that felt dangerous. The trip to Washington happened on a Thursday in late October. They flew out early, the three of them, Ethan, Clara, and Marcus Chen, crammed into a rental car by 9 a.m. for back-to-back meetings with agency representatives. The Department of Homeland Security was first, followed by the FBI, then an exploratory conversation with someone from the Defense Intelligence Agency whose job title Clara couldn't fully understand. Each meeting followed the same pattern: polite interest, technical questions, concerns about security and compliance, requests for documentation that Marcus assured them was standard. By the time they finished the last meeting at 4 p.m., Clara's brain felt like mush. That went well, Marcus said, scrolling through notes on his tablet. DHS is definitely interested. FBI is more cautious, but they'll come around. DIA wants a follow-up in 2 weeks. Good. Ethan checked his phone for the third time in as many minutes. Our flight back isn't until 8. We've got time to grab dinner if anyone's hungry. They found a restaurant near the hotel, the kind of place that served overpriced steaks to lobbyists and contractors. Marcus excused himself after the appetizers arrived, claiming conference calls he needed to make. Clara suspected he was giving them space, though she couldn't figure out why. He's not subtle, Ethan said once Marcus disappeared. About what? Leaving us alone. Ethan cut into his steak. He thinks we're... He stopped, seemed to reconsider. Never mind. But Clara's curiosity was piqued. Thinks we're what? Nothing. Office gossip. Ignore it. But his neck flushed slightly, visible above his collar. Understanding clicked. Heat flooded Clara's face. Oh. Yeah. They ate in silence for a minute, the air between them suddenly charged with things neither wanted to address. Clara's mind raced. Was there something there? She'd been so focused on work, on proving herself, that she hadn't let herself think about Ethan as anything other than her boss. But now, sitting across from him in dim restaurant lighting, she couldn't help noticing details. The way his hands moved when he talked, the sharp line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes when he looked at her. For what it's worth, Ethan said quietly, I don't encourage that kind of talk. The office speculation. I know. But I also can't... He stopped, choosing words carefully. I respect you too much to pretend there isn't something here. whatever it is. Clara's heart hammered. Ethan, I'm not asking for anything. His voice was low, serious. You work for me. That creates a power dynamic that makes everything complicated. I get that. But I also think you should know that the reason I leave at 5:30 every day isn't just because of Lily. Then why? Because if I stayed later, I'd find excuses to stop by your office, and that wouldn't be fair to either of us. He met her eyes. So I go home. Keep the boundaries clear. Make sure you have space to do your job without worrying about mixed signals. Clara couldn't breathe. Everything he was saying was reasonable, professional, exactly what a responsible boss should do. But underneath the careful words, she heard what he wasn't saying. The admission that he felt it too. This pull, this connection that had nothing to do with licensing deals and board meetings. What if I don't want the boundaries? The words escaped before she could stop them. Ethan went very still. Clara, I know it's complicated. I know all the reasons it's a bad idea. Her hands were shaking, so she pressed them flat against the table. But I also know that the past 3 months have been the first time in years I felt like myself. And you're part of that. A big part. You're not thinking clearly. The adrenaline, the success. It's don't. Clara's voice came out sharper than intended. Don't diminish what I'm feeling by calling it adrenaline. I'm not some starstruck employee with a crush on her boss. I'm a grown woman who's smart enough to know the difference. Ethan stared at her, something raw and unguarded flickering across his face. I can't risk losing you, not from the company. You're too important to what we're building. So we do nothing? So we wait. His hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. Until the power dynamic isn't an issue. Until you're established enough that nobody can say I influenced your career. Then, he swallowed, then maybe we can talk about this. It was the most frustrating, rational, utterly Ethan response possible. Clara wanted to argue, to push back, to demand something more immediate than careful planning. But she also understood what he was really saying, that he cared enough to protect her, even from himself. How long? She asked. 6 months. Maybe a year. Once you've got a track record nobody can question. His eyes held hers. I know that's not the answer you want. No, but I get it. Clara pulled her hands back, creating distance. We should probably head to the airport. They didn't talk much on the flight home. Clara stared out the window at clouds turned pink by sunset, thinking about timing and patience, and the kind of wanting that didn't have an easy solution. Ethan worked on his laptop beside her, the space between them feeling both too close and impossibly far. When they landed, he offered to drive her home. She accepted, too tired to navigate a rideshare. They drove through quiet streets, the radio playing something soft and forgettable. For what it's worth, Ethan said as he pulled up to her apartment building, this is harder for me than you probably think. Clara looked at him, really looked, saw the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he kept his hands on the steering wheel. I know. Good. He managed a smile. See you Monday? Yeah, Monday. She got out of the car and didn't look back, afraid of what she might do if she did. The next month passed in a strange kind of limbo. Clara threw herself into work, building out the government contracting framework, sitting in on executive meetings, learning to navigate the political landscape of Callaway Technologies. She was good at it, better than good. People started coming to her with questions, trusting her judgment, treating her like she belonged in rooms she'd once thought were miles above her reach. But underneath the professional success, something else simmered. She and Ethan maintained perfect boundaries at work. No lingering glances, no accidental touches, nothing that could fuel office gossip. But the awareness was always there, humming beneath every interaction. The way he said her name, the careful distance he maintained, the moments when their eyes met and everything unsaid hung between them like weight. Michelle noticed, of course. She cornered Clara one afternoon in the break room, arms crossed, expression knowing. So are you two going to deal with the obvious tension, or just keep torturing the rest of us by pretending it doesn't exist? Clara nearly dropped her coffee. I don't know what you're talking about. Please, I've known Ethan for 8 years. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Michelle's voice wasn't unkind, just matter of fact. And before you panic, I'm not judging, but I am saying that whatever's happening, you should probably talk about it before it implodes. He wants to wait. Until the power dynamic isn't an issue. Of course he does. Ethan's pathologically responsible. Michelle sighed. Look, I get why he's being careful. But life doesn't always wait for the perfect timing. Sometimes you just have to take the risk. Clara thought about that conversation for days. About risk and timing and the space between wanting something and being brave enough to reach for it. She thought about it during board presentations, and contract reviews, and late nights when she was the last one in the office. She thought about it every time Ethan said goodnight and walked away, maintaining that careful distance. The breakthrough came in early December, during a quarterly review that went better than anyone expected. The government contracts were progressing ahead of schedule. 3 agencies had moved into serious negotiations. The licensing revenue had stabilized the company's finances to the point where even Roberts couldn't find legitimate complaints. "This is exceptional work," said one of the board members Clara didn't know well. "The strategic licensing division has exceeded every projection. My compliments to whoever architected this approach." "That would be Clara Whitmore, our director of strategic licensing," Ethan said, and the pride in his voice made Clara's chest tight. She designed the hybrid model and led the government contracting initiative. After the meeting, the board members wanted to talk with her. They asked questions about methodology, about future projections, about her vision for expanding the licensing portfolio. Clara answered with confidence she'd earned through 3 months of proving herself. And when they finally let her go, she felt different, established, real. Ethan found her in her office an hour later. He closed the door behind him, which he never did. "That was impressive," he said. "Which part?" "All of it. The presentation, the way you handled their questions. You didn't need me there." He leaned against the door, hands in pockets. "You've built something here, Clara, something nobody can question or diminish. You did that." Clara heard what he wasn't saying, heard the timeline they'd agreed to shifting, becoming irrelevant. "It's been 4 months," she said quietly. "I know. You said 6, maybe a year. I know what I said." Ethan's eyes were dark, intent. "But I also know that I've spent 4 months watching you become exactly who you're supposed to be. And I'm tired of pretending that doesn't mean everything to me." Clara's heart stuttered. "Ethan, I'm not asking for anything tonight, but I need you to know." He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. "When you're ready, if you're ready, I'm here, however that looks." The careful distance he'd maintained for months crumbled in that moment. Clara crossed the office in 3 steps, stopped directly in front of him, close enough to see his pupils dilate. "I'm ready," she said. "Clara?" Her name came out rough, almost pained. "We should think about this. Make sure—" She kissed him, cut off whatever rational argument he was building with the press of her mouth against his. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then his hands came up to frame her face, and he kissed her back with the kind of intensity that suggested 4 months of restraint had cost him as much as it had cost her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "This is probably a terrible idea," he murmured. "Probably. We work together. People will talk. Let them. I've got a 7-year-old daughter who comes first, always." "I know." Clara pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I'm not asking you to change that. I'm just asking you to stop pretending you don't want this." Ethan's thumb traced her cheekbone. "I've wanted this since the day you walked into that diner and told me to fight." "Then stop fighting it." He kissed her again, slower this time, like they had all the time in the world. Maybe they did. Maybe for the first time in both their lives, timing was finally on their side. When Clara left the office that night, Ethan walked her to her car. They didn't hide it, the closeness, the way his hand rested briefly on her back. Tomorrow, people would notice. Michelle would gloat about being right. The office would buzz with speculation. But tonight, standing in the parking garage under fluorescent lights, Clara didn't care about any of that. She just cared that when Ethan said goodnight, it sounded like a promise. The office noticed immediately, exactly as Clara had expected. By Monday morning, the looks were different, curious, speculative, some openly amused. Michelle didn't even try to hide her satisfaction, cornering Clara before 9 with coffee and a grin that could have lit the building. "I knew it," she said triumphantly. "Jenkins in accounting owes me $50. Clara's face burned. "You bet on us?" "Everyone bet on you two. The only question was when." Michelle's expression softened. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you stopped dancing around it. Watching you both pretend was painful. We're trying to keep it professional." "Good luck with that." Michelle sipped her coffee. Just don't let it blow up the company. We've had enough drama for 1 year. Clara promised to try, though she wasn't entirely sure how to navigate this new territory. She and Ethan had agreed to keep displays of affection out of the office, to maintain the same professional boundaries they'd always had. But awareness changed everything. Now when he looked at her across the conference table, she felt it like touch. When his hand accidentally brushed hers, reaching for papers, electricity sparked up her arm. It was distracting and wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. The real test came 2 weeks later, when Ethan asked if she wanted to meet Lily. They were having dinner at his place, the first time Clara had seen where he actually lived. The house was in a quiet neighborhood, the kind with good schools and sidewalks where kids rode bikes. Inside was surprisingly warm, less minimalist than his office suggested. Toys in the living room, children's drawings on the refrigerator, a blanket fort constructed from couch cushions that Ethan navigated around like it was permanent furniture. Lily's at a sleepover tonight, he'd explained, pulling ingredients from the fridge. But she'll be home tomorrow. I thought if you're comfortable, maybe you could stay for breakfast. Meet her. Clara's stomach had clenched. That's a big step. I know, no pressure if you're not ready, but his eyes held something vulnerable, hopeful. I just think she's the most important person in my life, and you're becoming important too. Eventually those worlds need to connect. So Clara had said yes, and now it was Saturday morning, and she was helping Ethan make pancakes while fighting the urge to flee through the nearest exit. What did you say to a 7-year-old whose mother had died? How did you exist in that space without feeling like an intrusion? The front door banged open at 8:15. Small footsteps thundered through the house, followed by a high voice calling, "Dad, I'm home. Casey's mom let us have ice cream for breakfast and I didn't even throw up." Clara's hands froze on the mixing bowl. Ethan just smiled and called back, "In the kitchen, Lil." The girl who burst through the doorway was all energy and dark curls, wearing pajamas covered in cartoon cats and mismatched socks. She had Ethan's eyes, that same sharp gray, and a gap-toothed smile that transformed her whole face. She stopped short when she saw Clara. "Who's that?" "This is Clara. She works with me." Ethan kept his voice casual, easy. "Clara, meet Lily, the reason I own stock in a Band-Aid company." "I'm not that clumsy," Lily protested, but she was studying Clara with the kind of open curiosity only children possessed. "Do you like pancakes?" "I do," Clara managed. "Good. Dad makes the best ones, except when he burns them, which is a lot." Lily climbed onto a bar stool at the kitchen island, swinging her legs. "Are you his girlfriend?" Clara nearly dropped the whisk. Ethan coughed. "That's..." He stopped, clearly recalibrating. "Yeah, she is." "Cool, the last one was boring. She didn't like Pokemon." Lily tilted her head at Clara. "Do you like Pokemon?" "I don't know much about it," Clara admitted. "That's okay. I can teach you. I know all the evolutions." Lily launched into an explanation of something involving Charmander and fire types that Clara only half followed, but Ethan was watching them both with an expression that made Clara's chest ache. Breakfast was chaotic and surprisingly easy. Lily talked non-stop, jumping between topics with the randomness of a kid's brain. She complained about a girl at school who'd stolen her favorite pencil, demonstrated a cartwheel that nearly knocked over a chair, and demanded Clara's opinion on whether dinosaurs or dragons would win in a fight. "Dragons have fire," Lily argued, syrup on her chin. "But dinosaurs have numbers," Clara countered, "and the element of surprise. Dragons can fly, though. Not all of them. Some are more like big lizards." Lily considered this seriously. "You're smart. Dad said you were smart." Clara glanced at Ethan, who suddenly looked very interested in his coffee. "He talks about me?" "All the time. It's kind of annoying," Lily grinned. "But in a good way, like when he talks about Grandma's cookies or the time he won the science fair." After breakfast, Lily dragged Clara to see her room, which was an explosion of color and stuffed animals and art supplies. Drawings covered every surface, some recognizable as flowers or houses, others abstract chaos. One caught Clara's attention, a crayon family of 3 stick figures holding hands. "That's me and Dad and Mom," Lily said, following her gaze. Her voice went quieter. "From before the accident." Clara's throat tightened. "It's beautiful. I don't remember her much anymore. Just pieces." Lily picked at the edge of her bedspread. "Dad says that's okay. that she'd want me to be happy even if I forget. Your dad's right. Claire sat down on the edge of the bed, choosing words carefully. But it's also okay to be sad sometimes. About forgetting. Lily looked at her with those two old eyes. Are you going to leave too? The question hit like a punch. What? People leave. Mom did. Mrs. Patterson, that was our nanny, she left when I was 5. Dad's friend Marcus left for a new job. Lily's hands twisted together. Everybody leaves eventually. Clara understood then what Ethan had meant about nightmares, about processing trauma. This child had learned too young that stability was temporary, that people disappeared. And here was Clara, a new variable in an equation Lily had every reason to distrust. I can't promise I'll never leave, Clara said honestly, because lying to kids never worked. But I can promise I'm not planning to. And I can promise that if things change, it won't be because of you. You're pretty great, Lily. Even though I talk too much? Especially because of that. Lily studied her for a long moment. Then, with the sudden decisiveness of children, she nodded. Okay, you can stay. But you have to learn about Pokemon, and you can't tell Dad I still sleep with my nightlight. Deal. When Clara came back downstairs, Ethan was cleaning up the kitchen. He looked up, eyebrows raised in question. She's amazing, Clara said. She likes you, that's... He stopped, emotion crossing his face. That's important to me. She asked if I was going to leave. Ethan's hand stilled on the dish he was washing. What did you say? The truth. That I can't make promises about the future, but I'm here now and I want to be. He crossed to her, pulled her into a hug that felt like relief and gratitude and something deeper. Thank you, he murmured against her hair, for being honest with her, for not running. Clara held on, thinking about broken families and second chances and the terrifying act of letting new people into carefully guarded hearts. She thought about Lily's drawing, those 3 stick figures, and wondered if there was room in that crayon world for a 4th. The weeks that followed established a rhythm. Clara spent weeknights at her apartment, weekends increasingly at Ethan's house. She learned Lily's schedule, school drop-off at 8, physical therapy Tuesdays and Thursdays, bedtime strictly at 8:30, with negotiation allowed for special circumstances. She learned that Lily hated broccoli but would eat it if you called it dinosaur trees, that her favorite color changed daily, that she had her father's stubborn streak and her mother's laugh, though Ethan's eyes got distant when he heard it. Clara also learned that dating a single parent meant constantly coming second, and that she was okay with that. When Lily had a bad night, Ethan canceled their plans without apology. When the school called about an incident on the playground, he left work immediately. His daughter wasn't just his priority, she was his world. Clara understood that, respected it, but it also meant their relationship existed in the spaces between Ethan's responsibilities. Stolen moments in his office after Lily went to bed, weekend mornings before she woke up, late-night phone calls when Clara was alone in her apartment and Ethan was sitting in his car in the driveway, not ready to end the conversation. It should have felt like scraps. Instead, it felt earned. Work, meanwhile, had become everything Clara had stopped letting herself want. The government contracts came through in January, 3 major agencies, 5-year terms, revenue projections that made the board meetings feel like victory laps instead of interrogations. Robert still grumbled about risk management, but even he couldn't argue with success. Clara hired her own team, 2 junior analysts and a contract specialist, people who looked at her with the kind of respect she'd once reserved for professors and executives. She presented at industry conferences, fielded calls from competitors wanting to understand the hybrid licensing model, saw her name on articles about innovative financial strategies in tech. Michelle started calling her the Wunderkind, which Clara hated but secretly appreciated. You know you're going to end up on the executive team, Michelle said one afternoon in March. They were reviewing quarterly projections, numbers so good they almost seemed fake. Probably sooner than you think. Clara looked up from her laptop. What? Ethan's been talking about restructuring leadership, creating a COO position to handle day-to-day operations while he focuses on long-term strategy. Michelle's smile was knowing. He wants it to be you. No, I've only been here 9 months. And in those 9 months, you've generated more value than some executives manage in entire careers. Michelle closed her laptop. Stop waiting for permission to be successful, Clara. You've earned this. But the idea terrified her. Chief Operating Officer meant scrutiny, responsibility, a target on her back from anyone who thought she'd risen too fast. It meant being Ethan's equal in the corporate structure, which would either legitimize their relationship or make it impossibly complicated. She didn't know which scared her more. That night she brought it up with Ethan. They were at his place, Lily asleep upstairs, the house finally quiet. Clara had been trying to find the right words for an hour. Michelle says you're thinking about making me COO. Ethan looked up from the contract he'd been reviewing. She has a big mouth. Is it true? I've been considering it. You've proven yourself 10 times over. The role makes sense. He set the contract aside. But I wanted to talk to you about it first. Make sure you're comfortable with the optics. What optics? The CEO promoting his girlfriend to the C-suite 9 months after hiring her. Ethan's voice was careful, neutral. I don't want anyone thinking you earned the position for the wrong reasons. Clara felt heat rise in her face. You mean sleeping my way to the top? I mean, people will talk. They already do. This would give them ammunition. So what, I turn it down? Pretend I'm not qualified to avoid gossip? Clara stood, needing to move. I've spent 6 years accepting less than I deserved because I was afraid. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not asking you to. Ethan stood too, crossing to her. I'm asking if you're ready for what comes with this. The scrutiny, the pressure, people questioning every decision you make. It's brutal, Clara, especially for women. Especially for women in relationships with their bosses. And if I say yes anyway, then I'll back you completely. Fight anyone who suggests you didn't earn it. His hands framed her face. But I need you to go in with eyes open. This changes everything. Clara thought about the diner, about serving coffee to people who never saw her, about the finance degree she'd never finished and the ambitions she'd buried under survival, about Ethan walking into Riverside on that desperate morning and accidentally handing her a second chance at the life she'd lost. I want it, she said. The position, the challenge, all of it, even the hard parts. Okay. Ethan kissed her forehead. Then it's yours. The announcement came 2 weeks later at a company-wide meeting that felt more like a coronation than Clara was comfortable with. Ethan laid out the restructuring plan, explained the COO role, and introduced Clara as the person who would fill it. The applause was genuine from most of the room, though Clara caught a few faces that looked less enthusiastic. Roberts, predictably, had the expression of someone who'd just bitten into a lemon. After the meeting, he cornered her in the hallway. Congratulations on your promotion, he said, voice dripping false warmth. Quite a meteoric rise. Clara met his gaze evenly. Thank you. I'm sure your relationship with Ethan had nothing to do with it. My relationship with Ethan started 4 months after I joined the company. 4 months after I designed the licensing strategy that saved us from the merger you were pushing. Clara kept her voice level, professional. If you have concerns about my qualifications, I'm happy to walk you through my track record. Otherwise, I have work to do. She walked away before he could respond, heart hammering but head high. Michelle caught up with her at the elevators, grinning. That was beautiful. Roberts looked like he'd swallowed a frog. He's going to make my life difficult. He makes everyone's life difficult. It's his hobby. Michelle pressed the button for the 14th floor. But you handled it perfectly. Professional, factual, no room for him to claim you were emotional or defensive. I wanted to punch him. Obviously, we all do. That's why we don't put him on committees with sharp objects. The first month as COO was a baptism by fire. Clara had operational responsibility for every department, which meant dealing with HR disputes, IT infrastructure problems, facility management issues, and 100 other things that had nothing to do with the strategic work she loved. She worked 12-hour days, took calls at midnight when servers went down, learned to navigate personalities and politics she'd previously avoided. It was overwhelming and exhausting, and she'd never felt more alive. But it also meant less time with Ethan, less time with Lily. They still had weekends, but Clara was often too tired to be fully present, her brain still churning through problems that didn't pause for personal life. She saw the concern in Ethan's eyes even as he insisted he understood. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in May. Clara had promised to pick Lily up from physical therapy because Ethan was stuck in investor meetings. But an emergency with a major client ran late, and by the time Clara looked at her phone, she'd missed 3 calls from the PT office and 1 from Ethan. She called back immediately, stomach in knots. "I'm so sorry," she said when Ethan answered. "I got caught up and I didn't—" "It's fine." Michelle grabbed her. His voice was carefully neutral. "But Clara, we need to talk about this." They talked that night, after Lily was asleep. Ethan's face was drawn, tired in a way that had nothing to do with work. "I can't have you making promises to Lily and then breaking them," he said quietly. "She's already lost one parent. I won't let her lose faith in another person she's starting to trust." The words hit like a slap. "I didn't mean to—" "I know you didn't, but intent doesn't matter to a 7-year-old. Ethan ran his hands through his hair. "I get that the job is demanding. I've been doing it for 10 years, but Lily can't be an afterthought. If you can't handle both, then we need to figure out what that means." Clara felt tears burn behind her eyes. "Are you saying choose between the job and you?" "I'm saying I need to know you understand what you signed up for. Dating me means dating my daughter, too. And she deserves better than someone who's too busy to keep promises." He was right. Clara knew he was right, which made it worse. She'd been so focused on proving herself, on showing she deserved the promotion, that she'd lost sight of the other life she was building. The one with stick figure drawings on refrigerators and pancake breakfasts, and a little girl who'd asked if Clara was going to leave. "I'm sorry," Clara said, meaning it. "You're right. I'll do better. She stopped, thinking. What if I built margin into my schedule, blocked time for Lily stuff, made it non-negotiable, treated it like any other priority? "You'd do that? I don't want to be the person who breaks promises, especially not to her." Clara moved closer, taking his hands. "I love this job, Ethan, but I love you too. Both of you. And if that means working smarter instead of just harder, then that's what I'll do." Something in Ethan's expression softened. "You said you love us." "Yeah, I did." Clara's heart raced, but she didn't take it back. "Is that okay?" "It's—" He pulled her close, held on tight. "Yeah, it's more than okay." They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped together in the quiet house, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. This was real. Messy and complicated and real. The kind of thing worth fighting for. The next morning, Clara apologized to Lily directly. "I'm sorry I missed your PT appointment. That was wrong of me." Lily looked up from her cereal. "Dad said you got busy." "I did. But that's not an excuse. I made a promise and I broke it." Clara sat down at the table. "I'm going to try really hard not to do that again. And if I do, I want you to tell me, okay?" "Okay." Lily chewed thoughtfully. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you love my dad?" Clara's breath caught. 7-year-olds didn't pull punches. "I do." "Are you going to marry him?" That's something your dad and I would need to talk about." Clara chose words carefully. "Would you be okay with that?" "If we did—" Lily shrugged, but her eyes were serious. "I guess, as long as you don't try to be my mom. I already had one of those." "I would never try to replace your mom," Clara said firmly. "Nobody could do that. I just want to be someone who cares about you, if you'll let me." Lily considered this. Then she pushed her cereal bowl toward Clara. "You can have the rest. I'm full. But don't tell Dad because he'll make me eat fruit." Clara accepted the offering, understanding it for the trust it represented. The months that followed weren't perfect. Clara still worked too much sometimes. Lily still had nightmares. Ethan still carried the weight of single parenthood like armor he couldn't fully remove. But they figured it out together, the rhythm of shared life, the compromises and negotiations, the way love worked when it wasn't just about two people. The company continued to thrive. By October, a year after Clara had joined, Callaway Technologies had tripled its licensing revenue and expanded into 6 new markets. The board meetings felt routine now, even Roberts grudgingly acknowledging success. Clara's team had grown to 12 people, all of them sharp and driven and treating her like a leader instead of a lucky accident. She'd also finished her master's degree, finally. Night classes and weekend studying, Ethan quizzing her on financial theory while Lily did homework at the kitchen table. The diploma arrived in November, and Clara hung it in her office next to a photo of her mother. Proof that some dreams could be salvaged, even after years of being buried. The proposal happened on a random Thursday in December. Nothing dramatic or planned. They were at Ethan's place, Clara helping Lily with a math assignment while Ethan cooked dinner. It was ordinary and comfortable, and exactly the kind of life Clara had stopped believing she could have. Ethan called them to the table, and when Clara sat down, there was a small box next to her plate. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it," Lily said, bouncing in her chair with barely contained excitement. Inside was a ring. Simple, elegant, exactly Clara's taste. She looked up at Ethan with tears already forming. "I know we said we'd wait," Ethan said, moving to kneel beside her chair. "But I'm tired of waiting. I'm tired of half measures and careful timing. I want all of it, Clara. The messy, complicated, wonderful all of it, if you'll have us." "Both of us," Lily added. "I helped pick the ring, and I voted yes on the proposal, unanimously." Clara laughed through tears. "You voted?" "Dad said it had to be unanimous, because you're joining our family." Lily's expression turned serious. "So what do you say?" Clara looked at them. This man who'd stumbled into her diner desperate and broken. This child who'd taught her that family didn't require biology. She thought about the person she'd been a year ago, serving coffee, and convinced her best chances were behind her. She thought about second chances and the courage it took to trust them. "Yes," she said. "Obviously, yes." Ethan slipped the ring on her finger and Lily cheered like her team had won the championship. They ate dinner as a family, an actual family, official now, and Clara felt something unlock in her chest that she hadn't realized was still closed. Later, after Lily had finally gone to bed, Clara and Ethan sat together on the couch, her hand in his, the ring catching light. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For walking into that diner. For asking the impossible question. For seeing something in me I'd stopped seeing in myself." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. "For giving me a reason to bet on myself again." "You did that part," Ethan said. "I just gave you an opening. You're the one who had the courage to walk through it." Maybe that was true. Maybe they'd both saved each other, in different ways. Maybe that's what love was. Not rescue, but recognition. Two broken people finding each other and deciding the cracks didn't matter as much as what they could build together. The wedding happened in March, small and simple. Just family and close friends, Michelle serving as maid of honor and making a speech that had everyone crying and laughing in equal measure. Lily was flower girl, taking the job so seriously she counted each petal as she dropped it. Clara wore her mother's earrings and thought about how proud she would have been to see this day. Ethan cried during the vows, which surprised exactly no one. They honeymooned in Seattle, back where they'd closed their first major deal, though this time they actually saw the city instead of just conference rooms. They walked through Pike Place Market, rode the ferry to Bainbridge Island, stayed up late talking about the future they were building, about maybe expanding the family eventually, if Clara wanted, about the company's 5-year plan, about whether Lily was old enough for a dog. Normal things. Beautiful things. The kind of ordinary magic Clara had learned to stop taking for granted. When they got back, there was a card waiting on Clara's desk. Inside, in handwriting she barely recognized, was a note from Donna at Riverside Diner. "Saw your wedding announcement in the paper. Always knew you were destined for bigger things than slinging hash. Proud of you, kid. Come by sometime. Coffee's on me." Clara tucked the card into her desk drawer, next to the business card Ethan had left that first morning. Bookends on a year that had changed everything. She thought about the woman who'd stood in that diner parking lot, too afraid to hope for more. About the leap of faith it took to call a number on a business card. About all the small moments of courage that added up to a completely different life. Michelle knocked on her office door, pulling Clara back to the present. "Ready for the board meeting?" she asked. "Roberts is probably going to complain about something. It's his love language." "Let him complain." Clara grabbed her laptop and notes. "We've got the numbers to back up every decision we've made." They walked to the conference room together, and Clara felt the weight of her new life settle comfortably on her shoulders. COO. Wife. Bonus mom to a kid who still needed help with math homework. Leader of a team that respected her. Partner to a man who'd learned to trust again. It wasn't perfect. There would still be hard days, moments when old fears resurfaced, challenges she didn't know how to solve. But Clara had learned something important over the past year. She didn't need perfect. She just needed the courage to keep showing up, keep trying, keep believing she deserved the space she occupied in the world. The board meeting went exactly as expected. Roberts complained about projected expenditures. Claire presented data that made his concerns look petty. The rest of the board approved next quarter's strategy. Business as usual. Afterward, Ethan caught her in the hallway. "Dinner tonight?" he asked. "I promised Lily we'd try that new pizza place." "Sounds perfect." Clara kissed him quickly, professionally. They were still careful about that at work, even with rings on their fingers. Some boundaries stayed in place. "I'll meet you guys at 6. She watched him walk away, this man who'd accidentally saved her life by asking for help with his own. Then she turned back to her office, to the work waiting, to the life she'd built from broken pieces and stubborn hope. Sometimes the best things happened when you stopped playing it safe. When you took the risk, answered the question, walked through the door you'd convinced yourself was closed. Claire had learned that lesson the hard way, but she'd learned it completely. And she'd spend the rest of her life grateful for the cold morning when a desperate man walked into a diner and a woman who'd given up on dreams decided to try one more time. Because that's all second chances required. Not perfection, not certainty. Just the willingness to believe that maybe, possibly, against all odds, things could actually work out. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave, they did.